Your mom passed away? Oh, I see. I'm off on an overseas trip now. That's what my husband, who's been working away from home, blurted out on the phone after I had informed him of my mother's sudden passing. Not only was he not returning home, he was going on a trip abroad. I was in disbelief, but an even more unbelievable event occurred 3 days later. His parents passed away too, and I still couldn't get in touch with him. The reality of not being able to attend his parents' funeral due to his actions would turn his world into a living nightmare once he found out. My name is Nancy. I'm a 54-year-old homemaker. Our 20-year-old son recently moved out and started living alone, so it's just me and my husband Thomas at home now. Our relationship began through an introduction from my late father. My father had a close friend from his youth, and the two of them wanted us, their children, to get married since we were at an appropriate age and both working at the same company. This felt like an arranged date of sorts. We found that we had a lot in common, like loving the same music and enjoying traveling, so we hit it off right away. With the encouragement from our parents, we decided to get married quickly. We were blessed with a child and had a smooth married life. However, when our child was 10 years old, my father passed away due to illness. Apart from that, we were living in peace without any significant events. However, there was one thing about parenting that I couldn't agree with. I am a homemaker, and our living is made possible thanks to my husband's salary. Of course I appreciate that, but my husband would always claim he's too busy with work overtime till late at night, and usually return home just before the last train. Actually, it would be better if he came home with the last train. There were too many days where he simply sent a curt text saying, "I'll stay at the company tonight," and didn't come home. The meals I carefully prepared were often wasted. I wish he'd notified me earlier if he wasn't coming home, and I wondered if he really was that busy. My husband works at the same company as my father did, but my father, despite traveling a lot for work, seldom came home just before the last train or stayed overnight at the company. Given the cost of the mortgage, child rearing, and daily expenses, I couldn't loudly complain as all the money was earned by my husband. However, just because he worked didn't mean he didn't have to do anything around the house or look after our child. My dissatisfaction gradually built up towards my husband, who always prioritized hanging out with his friends on his days off. The only time our son saw his father was when he woke up and saw him sleeping next to him in the morning. When our son started speaking, I learned that he didn't think of his father as a parent, but as an unfamiliar man who's always sleeping at home. I felt overwhelmed, as it was almost as if I was raising our child alone. I had mentioned this to my father before, but he didn't listen, saying, "Thomas is doing his best at our company. Don't speak ill of your own husband. A wife should always support her husband." My father was a firm believer in traditional gender roles. The usual routine was my mother listening to my complaints and saying, "He doesn't know a woman's hardships," with a smile after my father had drunk himself unconscious. After my father's passing, my mother's vitality also started to fade to such an extent that I couldn't afford to complain about my husband. My mother used to complain about my father to me, but at the end of the day, she loved him. I wanted to build a family like my parents, but even though we seemed like a similar traditional household, our family was different. To put it bluntly, I think we lacked mutual respect for each other. Before I knew it, I had spent 10 years living the same way, and even after our son became an adult and moved out, our daily life didn't change significantly. One day, I softly voiced a complaint to my husband, who rarely paid any attention to the house. "Listen, dear, now that our son is an adult and moved out, I don't think you need to work so much overtime. I wish you could come home earlier and spend some time at home. We could do housework together, have meals together." I only wanted him to spend more time at home, but he took offense at the part about doing housework, and he was furious. "What do you think I'm working so hard for every day? And you don't even work. You expect me to whip my tired body into shape after work to do housework?" With that, he yelled and slammed the front door as he stormed out of the house. The sound of the door slamming loudly reflected the depth of his anger. At this rate, he probably won't come home for about 3 days. Even though my heart was deeply hurt, my mind was oddly calm to be thinking this. Why can't things go smoothly? All I want is to live in harmony with my husband. Did I say things wrong? Could there have been a better way to handle this without upsetting him? My mother, even in the same situation, seemed to have managed it better. What's different between my mother and me? As I pondered this, before I knew it, tears were trickling down my face. My husband returned home 4 days later. I'm sorry. I apologized to my returned husband. I wonder what I'm apologizing for. I don't think I did anything wrong, but still, I always apologized and he forgave me. This was our usual reconciliation pattern. "Yeah, whatever." Although he said that, our relationship as a couple clearly deteriorated after that. No, probably it's just that I wasn't satisfied. Up until now, I was always assuming I was at fault and would act submissive, but this time I couldn't feel that way. I found that I couldn't respect my husband anymore. One day, about a month later, while things remained awkward between us, he said, "I've been transferred to Alaska. I'll be moving alone." My husband, who hadn't been talking much lately, suddenly opened up with this news. Alaska? It's so far away. It feels as if the distance between our hearts is about the same. Alright, understood. Please take care. That's about all I could say. He packed his bags and went off to Alaska in no time. I was left alone in this big house. It seems like a lie that just a while ago we were a family of 3 living here. We've been married for about 30 years. Up until now, I managed to keep going for a child, but that child is no longer with us. Recently, it seems that divorces later in life aren't so rare. I wonder if we'll become one of those cases. Just as I was contemplating this, my smartphone rang. The caller was from my mother. I thought I could use some advice on this matter. Just perfect, I picked up the smartphone.
Hello, I'm Dr. Johnson from Chicago General Hospital. Am I speaking with the daughter of the owner of the cell phone?
Hospital? A sinking feeling of dread washed over me. Yes, I'm her daughter. Is there something wrong with my mom at the hospital?
Please remain calm. Your mother passed away a little while ago due to acute heart failure. We would like you to come to the hospital as soon as possible.
Everything turned black before my eyes. My mom is gone? Can it be some mistake? Just last week when we spoke on the phone, she was fine.
Hello? Are you still there? Hello?
I'm sorry, I'm just in shock and confused.
That's understandable. My condolences for your loss.
Anyway, I'll be there as soon as possible. Please tell me the address. I hurried to the hospital. At the reception desk, I gave my name and was guided to the room. Upon confirming the body, there was no mistake. It was indeed my mother. Seeing it for myself, the reality sank in. Until I reached the hospital, a part of me was hoping that perhaps my mother had simply dropped her phone and someone who happened to have a heart attack picked it up. It's so sudden. I hadn't even repaid her for raising me yet. Could you please leave us alone for a while? When I said that, the nurse was considerate enough to leave the room. And then I broke down and cried. After a while, when I managed to calm myself, I started to prepare for the funeral. Let's see, first I need to contact the relatives and make arrangements, and I should also let Thomas know. I took out my cell phone and called my husband, Thomas. He answered the phone in a sullen tone, and when I explained the situation, he just said, "I see." Not just I see, I'm holding the funeral soon. I want you to come here. But he told me he was about to go on an overseas trip with his colleagues. A trip? I unintentionally responded in a sharp tone, but he just replied that he was always working, and there was nothing wrong with going on a vacation on his day off. I didn't push it any further, thinking that it would only result in him saying,
"Who do you think puts food on the table?"
So I contacted our son and held the funeral together. Our son must have noticed that I wasn't doing well, so he said he would stay with me for a while, taking a leave from college. As soon as the funeral was over and I thought I could breathe a sigh of relief, I received a call from my husband's brother. Apparently, my in-laws had passed away in a car accident. With successive family tragedies happening, I still couldn't get a hold of my husband. It seems that modern smartphones can be used normally overseas, but I could not contact my husband. According to my son, depending on the country or the settings on the phone, it might not be possible to make contact from here. So I decided to send him an email. When he comes back from his trip, he'll surely contact me. A week passed, but still no contact. When my son checked with his office just in case, they said he was still on paid leave but was due back in 3 days. What country is he in? Hasn't he seen his email? What is he doing about his own parents? On a hunch that my husband might have taken up with his mistress, I hired a private investigator. I found out the results in just 3 days. As I suspected, he was having an affair. My husband took a woman he met on a trip to Japan as it was and let her go sightseeing. I received several photos of him happily strolling around the city with this foreign woman. It seems he's having a pretty good time in his new work assignment in Alaska. I wondered what I had been being considerate of. Was it concern for my husband who was working hard for the family? In reality, he's just a fucking bastard who goes abroad to play and has an affair. This might not be the first time. I was filled with rage, perhaps partly due to all the patience I had been practicing till now. I called my husband's office and told the receptionist I had an urgent matter that needed to be connected to him.
"Hello, what's the matter? I told you not to call me at work unless it's important."
"Didn't you check your email? Our parents are dead."
"You mean your mom, right? You told me about it before. Are you still upset about that? I finally got some time off. Can't be helped."
"No, I mean your parents. They died in a car accident."
"What? Are you kidding?"
"Why would I lie about something like this? You said you just came back from abroad, but I heard you've been back for several days. Why haven't you been checking your emails from me?" My husband seemed lost for words, seemingly unable to accept the reality that was suddenly thrust upon him. "Hello? Are you listening?"
Yeah.
His voice was trembling. While he had no qualms about skipping my mother's funeral, he seems to be shaken by the death of his own parents. But the funeral's over and their bodies have already been cremated. It's too late for regrets. I didn't feel any sympathy and I said coldly, "You better get back here as soon as possible." I thought I heard his hoarse reply, but I hung up without acknowledging it. "Mom, what happened?" "He's coming home now, and just so you know, I'm divorcing your father today." "What? Why all of a sudden? I get that you're mad he's not contactable during his busy time, but isn't divorce too extreme?" I explained everything to my son. It was a harsh reality to lay on our child, but he's an adult now. I thought it would be better to explain everything clearly rather than make up some weak excuse. This can't be defended. I'll stay by you, Mom." With my son's support assured, everything was ready. Then my husband came home.
"I'm home."
His tone was the usual arrogant tone, but his voice was noticeably lacking in vigor. He might be just a pitiful man who lost both parents at once and couldn't even attend their funerals, but I've got something to say. Your brother was pretty steamed, you know.
"It can't be helped. Even after returning to Japan, I was busy entertaining clients."
Quite a young client, isn't she?" Saying that, I showed him the picture I'd gotten from the private investigator.
Where'd you get this?"
"Look at you, arm in arm and having a good time. If this is really a client, did you pick up some new tricks? It seems like this isn't your first time. Sounds like you've got women everywhere." I dropped the bombshell. The effect was immediate.
"So I was busted."
My husband confessed without hesitation. Must have figured there was no point trying to cover it up. I continued to pile it on. "Not only not seeing my parents, but not even attempting to visit your own parents in their last moments?"
"Shut up. You have no idea how much stress I'm under at work. I'm working my ass off to support this family. Yes, even you who never lifts a finger, you're not faultless."
My husband showed no shame, instead going on the offensive. You're the worst. I'm ashamed to call such a man my father." "Let's be done with this. Let's get a divorce. I'll be filing for alimony later. I'll send your personal belongings from this house by FedEx."
"Humph, I'll be relieved to be free from a leech like you. I'll pay the standard alimony, but don't expect any more than that."
I thought I'd been doing everything for my husband, but was he thinking of me as a parasite? What had I been putting up with all this time? Taking into account the money spent on his numerous affairs, I decided to claim $45,000 in alimony. Whether he could afford it or not, he paid it in one lump sum. Since I used to report the money I spent and my husband would pay me back, I had no idea how much he had. However, due to the fact that he had been finding mistresses abroad, bringing them back to Japan, and partying around, and couldn't even attend his own parents' funerals, word spread throughout the company, forcing him to resign. He was in a decent position at the company, so he probably thought highly of himself. In reality, he got into the company through his parents' connections, and my husband, who didn't have any special skills, ended up having to settle for part-time work when he couldn't find another job. According to my brother-in-law, losing his family and job all at once, and now having lost his parents as well, and not even being able to say goodbye to them, seemed to be driving my husband to the edge. He can't sleep unless he takes sleeping pills and is reportedly seeing a psychiatrist. I didn't feel any sympathy at all. My son, who had said he'd stay with me for a while, returned to our family home, worried about my physical and mental exhaustion from the divorce turmoil. I think I'll live modestly with my son. Thinking about the future, I should have saved the alimony, but I really wanted a change of pace, so I decided to go on my first overseas trip with my son. After that, I think I'll start working part-time. The more I think about challenging something new, the more excited I get. My life is just beginning.